Hey, Jody here. This video is brought to you by my online store at weldmonger.com. That's how I pay for these videos. Let's do it. In this video, I'm going to be welding some 11 gauge 6061 T6 aluminum. I'm going to make a cube. I will show standard dip and pause techniques along with some pulse settings for running right over the wire using the lay wire technique on an outside corner. I'm using my crummy fixture plate here. It's a little bit overkill for just tacking up a cube, but since I've got it, I'm going to use it. I filed the edges off these two corners right here to leave a vent hole. I'm using 1/16 filler for the tack welds. I like to have my tack welds a little smaller than the final weld. Always good practice so you can't tell where the tack welds are when you're done. Good practice also is to wipe them down. I'm using some acetone here. They can look clean, they're not clean. They've got wire drawing lubricants and whatnot on them. Makes a difference. I started off using a tapered electrode for the tack welds. That gives you a better arc start for low amperage arc starts on aluminum. And it'll round a little bit more as I go and as I get on up to welding amperage, which is going to be around 130 to somewhere between 130 and 140 probably. I'll set the machine to 140 and I'll just use the foot pedal. Normally I'd probably just tack this by hand, holding it with one hand, tacking with another, but the fixture plate does make things super easy. Once I get two pieces tacked up, I'll put them together, line them up as square as I can get them, with very few tacks so that I can bump it around, massage it. If there's any gaps, I can get them out of there. Here's a close-up of the tack weld and the arc start with that tapered electrode. It lights up pretty crisp. It still wants to wander just a little bit, but I get a few dabs in there, taper off as I swirl to not leave a crater hole. So what I'm going to really want is some tacks on the corners, but then also maybe a small tack inboard, an inch or so that when I light up on the corner tack, if there's any stress on everything, it won't pop loose and leave a gap. You can see I've got a tiny gap there, but I can bump this thing with a mallet and get rid of most of those small ones. And there's my vent hole that I left just by filing the corners. I will zap that really quickly at the end when everything's cooled off. Well, let's talk a little bit about propping. This little steel cube here I made a good while ago in a video. I made it because I knew I would use it for a prop on things like this. It comes in super handy. You can just use a 4x4 wood block or something like that. I just was making a video of a cube, so I decided to keep it on hand for a prop. In fact, I'll do the same thing with this aluminum cube. I'll just keep it on the top of my toolbox and it'll be a prop whenever I need that particular height place to prop my hand. So just moving along here, not trying to win any races or anything as far as speed goes, but about 1/8 of an inch per second. You know, I'm dabbing, trying to dab the same amount of wire every second. You can see this is pretty much my go-to wire feed technique. That's something you really got to practice to get good at welding aluminum. You got to get that filler rod hand up to speed because you feed so much more aluminum than you would steel. It just goes into the puddle like butter. And so it really helps if you get your wire feeder hand trained to not be the weak link. These are actually a whole lot of fun to do. If you enjoy welding at all, there's nothing more enjoyable than a aluminum outside corner joint. And there's a lot of them on a cube like this. So it's a really good practice exercise. In fact, I'm going to be doing more of these just on my own in 2020, just to swap hands, get my left hand up to speed better, things like that. I don't know if I'll show all of them, but if they turn out good, I'll bring you along. If there's something to talk about, something to learn, we'll do it. Something that occurs to me right here is because I'm welding an aluminum cube on an aluminum fixture plate, if you don't weld on the aluminum surface, a lot of times you'll get arc marks on your aluminum part, especially if you weld on a carbon steel table, especially if you weld on a carbon steel table with hot rolled mill scale on it or whatever. But you know, you can eliminate that possibility by a direct ground, a third hand, you know, providing the ground or things like that. But just another plus on this aluminum fixture plate for welding aluminum parts. In just a few minutes, got one of these joints that's got a little gap on it, so that's where we'll show some pulse settings and using a slightly different technique where I just run over the rod. I mentioned earlier that I was adding rod about once a second and trying to move the torch ahead about 1/8 of an inch per second. And so it's interesting, this is a 6-inch cube, and I'm able to time things here as I edit this video. So 6 inches took me 41 seconds. The exact number would be 48 seconds. So I went just a little bit faster than that, and that's just a rule of thumb, just something to establish some consistency. There are times when you can go a lot faster, there are times when you need to go a little bit slower. Here I'm tapering off on the very end, a little extra rod as I taper off to avoid that crater. I'm going to speed it up by about 4x here in just a second, because this next joint looks just like all the rest of the joints. And then we'll get to some different techniques and also those pulse settings for running over the wire. Again, a very fun little project. I wish I could do these for a living, you know. That's the thing about production welding too, is it's a two-edged sword. It allows you to get really good and really fine-tune a weld, but it gets boring after a little while if you're doing hundreds and hundreds of the same exact thing. All right, I'm going to show now, this is a flex head torch, so this is a benefit of having a flex head torch. I can get the angle that I want, and I'm also going to be using my TIG finger as a little glide here, just to show if you need to do that if you're welding on a boat or something where you can't turn the part around. Sometimes you have to get weird angles. Having a flex head torch is kind of cool too for that, because you can get the optimum angle. So I'm just going to glide along here and weld a joint just like I have been before, just a little bit different method of propping. Instead of propping on that little steel block, I'm just going to do the little slide and glide here. Usually there's something you can figure out, some way to prop on something, but sometimes it's difficult, especially on aluminum when it gets so hot. So it's just nice to have the prop in your pocket, and it's also nice when it slides along nice and smoothly along a smooth aluminum surface like this. Now pay attention here, one dip per 1/8 of an inch, and I'm trying to travel about 1/8 of an inch between dips too. Again, that's just a rule of thumb, but it sure does give you some consistency if you really kind of pay attention to that and try to maintain it. As hot as aluminum gets, can you imagine how hot your knuckles would be if you were propping your glove this close to the weld, sliding along? Wouldn't work out very well. I remember getting an email from a guy one time whose wife bought him a TIG finger. He welded aluminum fuel tanks, and he was always burning his knuckles, hanging in there too long, trying to make the weld as good as he could. And that's what we welders do. We hang in, suffer a little pain on the knuckles in order to make a good weld. And first day after using that thing, his wife said he had a huge smile on his face when he came home from work. So that made me happy. All right, we're going back to propping on the little steel prop block here. I did get a few more arc shots that I want to share with you here because I think they're pretty good. Thanks to the clear number 8 Pro cup there, helps a whole lot in my filming so that you and I both can see everything. It lights up the way a lot too for me with my my eyes that aren't quite as good as they used to be. All right, getting toward the end. We'll show one more little ending here of tapering off. Nice close-up of tapering off the arc as I add just a little extra rod, swirl around to avoid that crater hole. Well, there's a little bit of a gap. Now, I could easily weld that without using any special techniques. It's not a big gap, but I just thought it would be a good opportunity to show another technique of just running over the wire when you have a small gap. So I was using 140 amps and using the foot pedal without pulse. These are my settings: balance on 67, frequency 100 hertz. That's a good all-around setting for this thickness. But with using pulse, I had to go up to 180 amps, 1.5 pulses a second, 33% peak time, and 33% background. Worked out not too shabby. Again, you got to use more amperage when you use pulse in most situations, especially on aluminum. I'm going up to a 1/8 diameter, 3.2 millimeter 4943 rod, just because that's the only thing I had 1/8 in. 4943 is very similar to 4043 in the way it welds. It's got slightly different properties. I kind of like it a little bit better than 4043. I think it wets out nice, has a better overall appearance. So here I'm just walking over the rod, trying to move along at a fairly steady clip, sliding along with that TIG finger. You can see me looking through the cup. Huge benefit on certain areas, like when you're welding down in a corner where you can actually see through the cup and feed wire and see what you're doing. Not necessary completely on a outside corner like this. Again, it just helps me with filming so that we all can see everything. I got a little bit tighter ripples on that using the pulse, but it was kind of fun. Not something I would do all the time. Just fun. Time to experiment when you're doing a cube like this. Time to try things. And again, I'm going to be doing some of these where I'm swapping hands, doing left-handed and using different size cups and different settings, high frequency, low frequency. We'll see what the outcome is. Might even use some different gases on them and see what works better. I'm getting close to the end of this cube here, where all the welds are pretty much done. And that's where that vent hole that I left in there to begin with is helping. Otherwise, if you've ever done this before where you seal something up, gases expand inside and it'll just blow the weld out and you got a mess. So sometimes you can drill a hole, and that's a good idea. And what you want to do is just leave your hole somewhere that's easy to get to. Then once I let it cool, I'll just zap it and pack rod in there really quick and seal up the hole. I wasn't able to capture that on an arc shot, but I think that's the corner right there that I zapped. But without that vent hole, you've had a bad day. Well, that was a super fun project. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did filming it for you. These are the TIG gloves that I added to my website some time ago. They're really nice, soft, and still durable. Of course, this is the 8 Pro cup that I used in this video. It's a good all-around cup for not just aluminum, but steel and aluminum. And I've done several videos showing it. And again, one of the biggest reasons that I use it is because it really helps me film a better video where everybody can see everything, including me, a lot better than if I used a pink cup. Here's another shot of a little aluminum project I did looking through that cup. But you can learn more about the cup, my TIG fingers, the gloves that I have, and lots of other products that I've tried out and recommend and have used in videos. It's all at weldmonger.com. You can see here I've got a little bundle of the Furic 8 cup 4-pack as well as a TIG finger. You can save a little money there. And also, you saw me using a 17 air-cooled torch in this video. And the Furic 8 clear cup works great on that torch, but it does require an adapter kit. But there's plenty of little infographics on my store to let you know what size torch you have and whether or not you need an adapter kit in order to use a 8 clear cup. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in any of this stuff, go check it out at weldmonger.com.